Thanks very much, Terry. Yes, I'm delighted to be able to talk again about work-based assessment. I wanted to fill you in on the research that I'm going to do, because this is around the area of work-based assessment. And in June there, I got the recent teaching fellowship, National Forum Teaching and Learning Fellowship. And I decided at that point that I was always very interested in this area of work-based assessment, but I thought in looking at this research that I didn't want to launch into it initially and think, well, I have ideas I want to do, and I wanted to find out what were the issues that the sector had. So my research question is around exploring barriers and solutions, which I'll come to in a minute, to an emerging assessment challenge. So the challenge that has emerged over the last few months since I got the fellowship in June, I've learned a lot from these webinars. I've learned listening to you and listening to the chats and the conversations about what is a challenge for many of you across the sector. So I've learned that, and many of these, as I noted earlier, were around developing meaningful or authentic, language is interchangeable, but also comparable and consistent assessments. And when I looked at the literature on this, authentic assessment and meaningful was particularly coming through. And we're also learning quite a bit from the ISI data, from the student voice, around what they're saying with sort of 5 years of ISI data. So that's the student engagement survey that happens annually. So my question that has emerged from all of you and from the literature is, how do we optimize both meaningful and comparable work-based assessments? So balancing authenticity and consistency across different work integrated learning contexts. So that is my question going forward. And what I mean by context is, I'm looking at it more broadly. Nora talked about all the different types of contexts today, but for the research, I want to particularly look at context A, which is the types of work integrated learning that happens on campus. So being inclusive of these types of modules that encourage case-based projects, problem-based learning, projects with industry partners, and many of you talked about experiences that fall into that space, important with sort of alternative types of placements. The middle section B is placements such as things like internships, work placements, cooperatives, where the key educator is actually probably the institution or the educator primarily. And then finally, onto the right-hand side of this kind of slide is context C, which is things like clinical placements, teacher education, probably in the space as well that we've heard, possibly apprenticeships, where the practitioner employer has more of a say. And then when you look up the other axis, is the level of student empowerment. So Megan, you'll be pleased to know that I'm really looking at how much students are empowered in these contexts. So taking these as the context broadly, what my research wants to do is look at the challenge between balancing consistency and authenticity. It's not a binary balance. It doesn't mean that you're either one or the other. That's why I liked this particular image with sort of a complicated balance, because it is complicated. But how do we look at meaningful assessment, empowering students, complex learning, practitioner assessment, some of the things that Rola talked about today, and in fact Megan talked about herself. And then you look at things that are, well, how do we stand over it? And how does this institution be consistent? How do we look at standards and quality? And how does the educator stand over it? And how do we get the balance between these in the different contexts? So very briefly, because I know you're probably tired of the stage, but what the research will do is first to look at it quite conceptually. So I'm going to interview some researchers, key researchers, about what their understanding of this balance is. And then I'll also come in with them again as a focus group at the end. So I will be looking at it quite conceptually and scholarly. But the bit that many of you might be interested in is what are some solutions? I want to use a real participatory research approach to this. I want the research to be useful, not just done on to. So I want to work with groups to look at some solutions as a group to the challenge of optimizing both meaningful and comparable work-based assessments. So balancing this authenticity and consistency. So I want to carry out some solution-focused groups, online workshops. And I want to do them across these 3 different contexts. So the idea is that I would work with maybe 3 groups across these 3 different contexts to work through some solutions in these online workshops. And each group would have students, practitioners, and either higher or further education staff and others that people have mentioned. And that will be happening between January and August. So I really want to develop some solutions with you as a sector. So what I would say is that it is going through ethics at the moment, so I have to get it stamped at the moment. But shortly, when I have that, I will be looking for people to maybe volunteer or to be part of these kind of groups, these solution-focused groups in your different disciplines. So if people are interested, there's my email there, and you can contact me. And once it's up and running between January and August, I would be interested in working with groups in an online workshop to develop some solutions. And obviously, each group will have the solutions to their own, and then they can work with them. But obviously, I will also share the common collaborative learning from this back with you. So that's the research, but I think it should be valuable to the sector. And in December 2021, we'll hear back about the whole research. So that's the research. Might hand back to you, Terry.